I, 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 I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened and read it and burned that. Man, the way that I look.
Welcome to another edition of Critical Insight in Your World News. I'm your host, Solomon Kamajan, and once again, it is an honor and a pleasure to be joined by journalist, author, and activist, Mr. Stephen Lendman. And Stephen, thank you so much for coming on Critical Insight in Your World News.
Oh, thank you, Solo. Big topic. Chavez passing. Very, very sad time. I've told people I just can't get this feeling of despair out of my gut that a man of his stature, his importance, he meant so much to so many people. He did so much, Solo, and now he's gone, and we have to push on, and we can talk about it.
Definitely. So we'll hit the ground running. I'm glad you brought up, because that is the topic of the day. So I wanted to ask you, what did Chavez, before we get into the nuts and the bolts of things and exploring the facts around Chavez, the Bolivarian Revolution, life on the ground in Venezuela, that the corporate media, the disgusting, reprehensible, there's so many adjectives, so many negative adjectives I want to use to describe the corporate media, and perhaps we'll do that a little bit later in the show. But I want to ask you, before we even get into that, what did Chavez, what did he grow to mean to you? What kind of figure was he to you?
Oh, he meant so much to me, Solo. The two figures of the last century that have meant so much to so many people, who put the needs of their own people above any power they could get for themselves. Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez. Castro did it his way, Chavez did it his way, but basically they did so much that was the same. They put the interests of ordinary people above themselves. I truly believe that, and you can say anything you want about them, but the people who lived under them, if it weren't for the sanctions in Cuba, if it weren't for the vilification that America and the West did to Chavez, things could have been so much better in both countries. And yet Castro survived. Astonishing, Solo. Castro, 86 years old, he survived so far. He thought of Chavez as his son, his successor. He called him the Olympic champion of, I forget his precise words, but the Olympic champion of populism in the 20th century, his rightful successor, and he truly was. And Chavez thought of Castro as his father, as his mentor, as his friend. And ironically, the old man is still here, and the young man who was chosen to be his successor is gone, Solo. Tragic irony.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we can just hope that his legacy will live on, timelessly, as the legacy of so many revolutionaries do. I want to ask you a question, Stephen. There's been a lot of misinformation, and that's the common theme that the corporate media does, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, ABC, obviously Fox News. The corporate media in America is a vile and disgusting tool, because it has blood all over its hands. It drums up wars when it knows it should be challenging the narrative coming out of the State Department and the Pentagon, and the way that it operates, it's almost like the fourth branch of government, because they work lock and step with the U.S. government to put out these narratives, to drum up war in Libya and to Iraq, initially Afghanistan, instead of challenging whatever is fed to them by the Pentagon and the White House and the State Department. So that being said, they've put out a range of just lies, and I remember seeing just a couple days ago when Chavez died, this just vile human being was on CNN, and they had this panel, and he basically alluded to the fact that he said that, basically saying that Chavez was in hell, because he said that he's undoubtedly laying with the devil right now. And so my question is to you, amongst all those the lies and disinformation that is put out there, it's almost like psychological operations that the U.S. corporate media does on a routine basis. What are some of the things, people are tuning in right now, what are some of the things that they should know about Chavez? What did Chavez bring about in his 14 years? What kind of market changes did he bring about in the day-to-day lives of Venezuelans, especially those who had been marginalized for literally hundreds of years?
Oh, he did so much solo, so much. When he gained office in February 1999. We'll go back to some point in the 90s. Let's call it the end of the 1990s. But well, before he came into office, poverty in Venezuela was something like 60%. It was probably higher than that because standards of poverty can be what people say they are. Venezuelan poverty was very, very severe and deep. And he took that poverty, let's just call it 60%. He took that poverty and he took it down to a couple of years ago to about 27%. And the most recent figure that I quoted in my article was that he took it down to about 7.4%. Absolutely astonishing. People had nothing. They didn't get enough to eat. They didn't get education. Millions of people in Venezuela never had health care. I don't know what they did when they got sick, but they never had health care. They struggled to get by best they could. And he changed everything. He instituted universal education from preschool to PhDs to medical degrees to law degrees. He put in universal health care. He set up clinics. He set up hospitals. He traded with Cuba on a cooperative basis. He gave Cuba oil. Cuba gave Venezuela thousands of doctors, medical practitioners. Again, gave Cubans the medical care they never had before. He traded with other nations by his system of ALBA. Again, cooperative trading. Instead of one nation preying on another, nations cooperated with each other to do for each other and with each other so they could benefit equitably by the kind of trade they had. If one nation was strong in oil, the way Venezuela was, and another nation was strong in another commodity or another service, then one service went one way, the commodity went another way, and both nations profited. This is what he did. He established indigenous rights. He established a housing program. He built many, many thousands of houses for people who never had them before. He established microcredit so people could start small businesses. He established community councils to establish democracy at the grassroots levels. He did astonishing things solo. Again, Venezuelans never had these kind of things before. I don't know what they'll do without him, but I will say this. Nicolas Maduro will stand to be his successor. He is interim president right now. Chavez chose him to be his rightful successor. People are wondering just how good he will be. I think he will surprise people. I think he will do the job. I think he'll carry the torch. I think he'll carry on where Chavez left off. Nobody knew who Chavez was when he came into power in February 1999. Is this guy for real? Will he do the things that he said he'll do? Nobody knew, but he did. So people are wondering about Maduro now. Will he come through? Will he be the Chavez of the new century? Will he take over? I think he will. We'll have to wait to find out, but I think he will. I think he will advance socialism in the 21st century. I think Venezuelans will get what they have now. They'll get more, and I think the revolution will go on.
Thank you.
I believe it, and I hope it's true. One of my favorite expressions is, we'll know in the fullness of time, Solo. Indeed we will. It'll take the fullness of time, but indeed we will know then. And I think it'll prove that he will come through.
Definitely. My next question for you, basically here in the U.S. you have two camps of people that will refer to Chavez as a dictator, the misinformed, the vastly misinformed and politically undereducated folks who have just been streamlined a vast array of misinformation, disinformation around Chavez as well as other topics. And then you have, on the other hand, I really can't think of any better adjective than or noun to call the scumbags that know that he's not a dictator, but they put it out there. You know, anyone from the White House to the throughout the Obama administration, you know, Bush's administration, of course, and you know, called him a dictator as well. What do you say? What do you say to those individuals who put out that information to say that he's a dictator? Somebody that's listening right now that perhaps is in the first camp, that was just uninformed and has been thinking that he was a dictator. What information do you have to counter that?
Well, the best information, Solo, is to look at what he did, his policies, and look at the adulation that his people gave him. Millions of people love Hugo Chavez. They would rally in the streets for him. They did it often, and there were times that millions of people came out to the streets. You never see anything like this in America. Chavez was the real thing. He was a Democrat. He was, as they say, Solo, the threat of a good example. So what do you do with a man like this? You beat up on him, you lie about him, you say things that aren't true. He was the real thing. He truly was a wonderful Democrat. And how could Venezuelans love a despot? They would never love a despot. They loved him for what he was and what he did. And they will never forget. His legacy will never die. He will be buried in the Pantheon Nacional. It's the official resting place for Simon Bolivar. He will be there alongside him. Make no mistake about that. But he's the real thing, Solo. He is a Democrat. And nothing anybody will say can disprove that. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, CBS, the whole lot of them, they really are scumbags. They lie, they cheat, they're bald-faced liars. There is nothing in America like Venezuelans had under Chavez in Venezuela, and that's the reason they beat up on him. But again, I repeat, he's the same. He's the real thing.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And it's just interesting. Can you imagine if Venezuela and Chavez were actually doing things that the U.S. is doing? If they had something like the NDAA or Patriot Act, basically warrantless taps, and with the NDAA, that Obama signed December 31st, 2011, basically he has this kill list as well that, any American anywhere in the world can be just eviscerated, by way of a drone or otherwise, with no habeas corpus, no due process whatsoever. Imagine if Venezuela had been invading countries and had been using drones like the U.S. is using drones and killing masses and large swaths of innocent civilians. Upwards of 95% of the people that are killed by way of Obama and Bush's drones, have been civilians. And I mean, if Chavez or any of these other folks that they label as dictators were doing these type of things, you can imagine what the rhetoric would actually be, for that. But Chavez and Venezuela have not done any of these things. And so you've written a lot about this. You've talked about the Obama administration being one of the worst ever, and and I couldn't agree with you more. So what can you kind of speak on those contradictions about actually what the U.S. is really doing, and in comparison to what Venezuela hasn't done and what Venezuela has done for humanity?
Oh, absolutely. America has neoliberal harshness, Solo. Venezuela has social democracy. Venezuelans get benefits Americans can't even imagine. They would be astonished to know what Venezuelans get. And Americans that are so out of touch with reality, and they think that Obama really is the good guy. Obama is a supreme con man. He has literally conned the American people to think that what he is doing is benefiting for him. Tomorrow I'll put out two more. One is my personal tribute to Chavez, and the other one is an article that I call Obama Authorizes Killing Americans Domestically. Eric Holder interviewed before a Senate Judiciary Committee. He wrote a letter to Ron Paul. I quoted from the letter that he wrote him. And Ron Paul, not Ron Paul.
Rand Paul?
Rand Paul's son. Senator Rand Paul. And Rand Paul questioned, what right do you have to kill Americans? And Holder gave a convoluted answer. So I took off from there and I wrote an article. I've written before about Obama indefinitely detaining U.S. citizens, NDAA at the end of 2011. You mentioned it, New Year's Eve. Same thing at the end of 2012. The same provision, more or less, reauthorized for another year. This will go on year after year. Obama's kill list, his disposition matrix, John Brennan, the CIA killer, he's in charge of America's Murder Incorporated. There's nothing else you can call this. This is what America is, Solo. There's none of this in Venezuela. Nobody gets authorized to kill anybody. Chavez doesn't operate torture prisons. He doesn't believe in torture. He doesn't invade his neighbors. He doesn't do any of the imperial things that America does. These are the policies that Americans get. Americans get tyranny. Venezuelans get democracy. That's the threat of a good example, Solo. That's what people in America and the corporate media, the scoundrel media, the way I like to describe them, that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that policies like this will spread to other countries, dare I say America, and just muck up their whole dirty game and change the ball game. That's what's worrying them. I can only hope that someday that happens. In an article I wrote once about Chavez, I made a comment, and I mentioned it in my article tomorrow. I wrote a personal letter to Hugo Chavez. And I took a couple of comments from the letter, and I personalized the comments that I made. And one of the things that I said, and I put in my article tomorrow, was, if you ever get tired of governing Venezuela, maybe your spirit will come to America, because we really need you here. We don't have anything like you in America. We need you here. And I'd really like to call him Hugo. I mean, he was a man of the people. He's a man you could sit down with and call Hugo. That's the kind of a man he was. I really wanted to meet him one day, Solo, to have a chance to meet him, to have a chance to interview him. I don't know if he spoke English or not, but what a wonderful session that would have been. I never got a chance, and now he's gone. I saw a bulletin come over that all the scoundrel media picked up on. I don't know if it's true or not. It said that he died of a massive heart attack. I checked Venezuela analysis. I checked Hands Off Venezuela. I checked the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign as of about an hour ago. I saw nothing on this. So unless I see it on a reputable website, I won't believe it. But CBS and CNN and NPR and the rest of them are saying he died of a massive heart attack in pain. Well, if you have cancer, you certainly don't live in comfort. Maybe he did die in pain. He certainly didn't die easily. And to go through 3 months of a long struggle, very possibly it happened. But I want confirmation.
Right.
Anyway, it's a very, very sad time.
Definitely. And as you know, being the historian you are, and you've written about it, countless times about the U.S.'s meddling in other people's affairs, and that's perhaps a very euphemistic way of me putting it. So let me put it in more blatant terms. The U.S. destabilizing, going into other countries and destabilizing other countries, whether it was Iran installing the Shah and taking out Mohammad Mossadegh, or taking out Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala just a year later, whether it was Chile taking out Allende and installing the brutal Pinochet, Patrice Lumumba, as we know, was a CIA coup that took his life and eviscerated his body, cut into different parts, and put into acid. And so we know the U.S. has a long track record that they're very proud of going into democratic elected government, or countries where there are democratic elected governments, and destabilizing them, whether it meant taking somebody's life or not. What is the history? What is the U.S. history, United States history in Venezuela? Can you tell our viewers what happened in 2002 and what they have tried their best to do throughout Chavez's administration?
Well, I think before Chavez came into power, Solo, the U.S. relationship was in bed with the oligarchs, the corporate predators that created great poverty in the country, that raped the country of its resources, that handed a lot of them over to U.S. corporations, sucked the money out, get it to the corporate predators. That was the Venezuela pre-Chavez. Chavez tried to change it in 1992 with a coup that failed, but it was a benevolent coup to establish a democratic government. It failed. He came back again. He was lucky. He only spent 2 years in prison. He got out. He got a second chance, and it was wonderful. So again, Obama gives America permanent war, and Chavez gives Venezuelans permanent democracy. Just a vastly different system that went on in both countries. And your specific question again?
Specific question is the U.S.'s involvement in the coup in 2002 that took Chavez out for about 48 hours and was, you know, thankfully reinstalled by the military.
Indeed. April 2002, 2 days. Bush had a chance to kill him. He didn't do it. Venezuelans came out en masse. They supported Chavez. The thing that saved Chavez, two things saved Chavez, because he literally came back from the dead, Solo. The masses of public support that absolutely did not want to lose him, and the ranks of the military that supported him. I think most of the military in Venezuela supported him. I think it came from the high ranks, it came from the middle ranks, the junior officers, the junior grade ones. They supported him, and they simply did not want to lose what he had. That would never happen in America. The Pentagon would never go along with reinstituting a Democrat that was ousted to be put back in office again. But it happened in Venezuela. In 2000, at the end of 2003 and early 2004, the oil management lockout cost Venezuela billions of dollars. But again, Venezuela survived. The country went on, came back, prospered greatly in the aftermath of this. And then in 2004, one more thing. Venezuelans have, by law, may recall their president and have a new election. I think it takes about 60% of the vote. I forget the actual percentage, but I wrote about this. I wrote about it a couple of times. But Venezuelans, there was a recall election. They rigged it to get enough votes. They get enough votes to have the election. But when they had it, they couldn't get rid of Chavez. He got a strong majority. He stayed in power. He remained president. So they had 3 cracks at getting rid of him. They failed each time. And of course, in the elections that were ran, the legitimate ones, they couldn't get rid of him that way. Venezuelans still have him. The only way they could get rid of him, I think, Solo, was to kill him. And I really believe, I can't prove it, maybe we'll be able to one day, but I believe Obama wanted him dead. I believe he ordered him killed, and I think he killed him. I think he either poisoned him in some way or infected him with some cancer-causing substances. One substance, multiple substances, and I think that's what killed him, and I think that's what happened. And what they will say is the cause of death, a combination of cancer, maybe a heart attack. They took him out, they brought him down, and I think it was done deliberately. Maybe one day we'll find out. Russia, Vladimir Putin, is calling for an independent investigation to find out the cause of death. I think there will be. There should be an autopsy. They should find out exactly what they can to see whether he really was taken out by some foul substance in his body. And if that's the case, we know where fingers need to be pointed. So I'll point them there right now in a preliminary way. I think it's very possible we'll find out that indeed Obama killed him.
Because, thank you, because this is not unprecedented in terms of leaders being infected with and poisoned with some substance that you know, soon thereafter gets them very sick, causes cancer. You want to elaborate just really quickly about Yasser Arafat?
Oh, there's no question that Israel poisoned Yasser Arafat. They found traces of polonium, a very deadly poison, hard to detect, but it was found on his clothing. There's an autopsy that's in progress. There was an autopsy conducted by by a Swiss research organization. They determined that Chavez was taken out by polonium. Well, if he was, and I believe he was, there's a leap between proving that this was done and who actually did it. Who had motive and opportunity, Solo? Israel. Only Israel. Right. His own people wouldn't do it. Right. Israel was the only one that could have taken him out. I believe they did. It'll be very hard to prove. Mahmoud Abbas, the nominal president of Palestine, Israel rigged his election. Abbas said, if it's proved that Israel killed Arafat, we will take Israel to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. You can go to the International Court of Justice, ICJ, which tries countries, or you can go to the ICC, which tries individuals. So you could try Netanyahu, you could try other Israelis at the ICC, and you could take Israel as a country to the ICJ, International Court of Justice. Back in the 1980s, the ICJ fined America, I think it was something like $16 billion for lawlessly attacking Nicaragua. Nothing happened, no follow-up, nobody paid a penalty, everything just continued on as the way it was. But the ICJ came down hard on America. The ICC is a lackey court, but it would be very nice to see a ruling against America in either court or in both of them, charge them, convict them. There's no question that Israel is guilty. It would be wonderful to see an official verdict saying so. Maybe it'll happen.
Thank you. My last question to you, Stephen, before we go, is what are your final comments on Chavez, the Bolivarian Revolution moving forward, and what will Chavez's lasting legacy be ultimately?
Well, his lasting legacy for me, Solo, is, along with Castro, two of a kinds. Chavez did for his people through elections. Castro changed the system. Castro changed a repressive police state / mafia-run casino. Mafia-run casino. What's the term I want? Brothel. Police state / mafia-run casino / brothel. He changed that system. He wanted nothing to interfere with Cuba keeping the system that he had. He established a system not democratic in the terms of elections, but giving the people of Cuba the same system that Chavez gave Venezuelans through elections. So he did it his way. Chavez did it his way. The people in both countries benefited. I hope they keep it. I hope they never lose it. Both leaders want them to lose it. They're the seminal leaders of the 20th / 21st century. They're vital, important people. It's so important for the people in both countries to keep what they have. They're iconic figures. They're so important to me. They're so important to the people in both countries. You hear about people in the countries who leave, and Cubans leave, come to America, Venezuelans leave, go someplace else. But they're the minority of the people. The great majority of the people in both countries, they want to stay there. They don't want to go anyplace else. And they want to stay there for the right reason. And when Democrats come from America and from other countries, and they visit Venezuela, and they visit Cuba, I remember when Gore Vidal visited Cuba, and he made this was not too long before he died, and he made a statement to the effect that, I'm in a country where I can breathe free. That's the way he felt. Nobody came after him. Nobody told him what he could do or not do, what he could say or what he couldn't say. He was in a country where he could stand up freely. He could go to an open forum. He could speak his mind freely. It's the way I feel when I'm on Press TV solo. I can go on Press TV, the Iranian English language television network, and I can say anything I want.
That's right.
I'll give you my final comment. They had me on this morning talking about Venezuela, and they gave me about 5 minutes. I got in what I could. They also taped comments that I made, so they gave me 2 cracks at Hugo Chavez's passing. But I ended my comments this morning this way, solo. I said a lot of the things that I said here with you today, and I ended it saying, Viva Chavez, Viva Chavismo, Viva Venezuela.
That's right.
A wonderful way to end the program.
Yes. Thank you for your time. And I just to folks that are listening or watching right now, you know, all you have to do is Google Stephen Lendman. Just Google that last name, Lendman. Google Stephen Lendman, and you'll take you to his blog site. His articles are everywhere. You know, Global Research. I mean, they're on so many different sites. Information Clearinghouse, Daily Censored. One of the most prolific, probably the most prolific columnists I know, and just does fine work. So people, you know, clear out that disinformation, get a hold of authors and columnists like Stephen Lendman, read their pieces to get the truth and get a much better narrative, more accurate narrative of actually what's going on. Stephen, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So can I get one final comment in?
Sure.
I'm 78 years old. I'm retired. I never expected to be doing what I'm doing, but I began doing it, and I call myself obsessed. I'm alone. I have all the time in the world. I can spend my time any way I want to solo. I decided the way I want to spend my time is to write. I do it every day. I do it 7 days a week. I can't imagine doing anything less. I generally put out 2 articles a day. Once in a while, my obsession goes overboard, and I get 3 articles out. I did it yesterday when I got my Chavismo Lives article out. Again, I've got all my time. This is the way I want to use it. What better way to spend my time in retirement? It sure beats fishing.
That's right. That's right. That's Stephen Lendman. I'm Solomon Kamajan. You've been watching Critical Insight in Your World News. Long live Hugo Chavez. Long live the Bolivarian Revolution. Long live the good people of Venezuela. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Solo.
I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened and read it and burned that. Man, the way that I live don't concern that. Man, we gon' have to settle this.